So what equipment do you need for planetary astrophotography? Now, planetary astrophotography is one of the hardest simply because you need good atmospheric seeing conditions, and basically the most important thing in planetary astrophotography is a large aperture telescope. This way you can collect a lot of light with your bar lens when you zoom, and you can get a bigger zoom, more resolution, plus you get less noise, which results in more detail. So that is why an 8-inch scope or more is recommended, like the Celestron C8, or a scope similar to that. Now the Edge HD8 is a good scope as well, but it's only really good for deep sky, like in terms of the corrections it gives, because the correction's only worth it for deep sky. That's what I'm trying to say, because planetary, you're centering the image anyway, so it doesn't really matter, and it's pretty small. So yeah, there's that. Another thing that is definitely recommended in planetary astrophotography is getting a planetary dedicated camera. The reason why you want one of these, like for example the ASI 662MC, the reason why you want one of these is because it has less noise, and you can get a fairly good zoom on it. And the reason why you can get zoom is because of its small pixel size and small sensor. You can get a nice shallow depth of field, and you can get a lot better crispy images with it anyway. With the DSLR, you also have less frame rate, so that's not as good, and that's not as good. When you have a higher frame rate, you can get a lot more, catch those good moments when the seeing is really good. You can catch those really nice seeing moments. And so when the seeing is really nice, you have that data so you can work with it and stack it in the end. Now, another piece of gear that's really important is the mount that can hold all this together. The mount is pretty important, but you want to track, because if you don't track well, you're not going to be able to keep the planet in frame for long and won't be catching enough frames to get those good seeing conditions. But technically, the mount is very, very important, because if you don't have a heavy enough mount or heavy payload capacity enough mount, like one with a good payload, without a good payload, you're not going to be able to support that very well, and the telescope's not going to track very accurately. So there's that. Another thing I would recommend is definitely getting a Schmidt Cassegrain and not a Newtonian. Now, I had this problem with my Newtonian. A Newtonian reflector is much better in terms of artifacts and everything else. You get a better aperture for the price. The thing about Newtonian reflectors, though, is when you get a Newtonian reflector, you're going to be adding double the weight to your rig compared to a Schmidt Cassegrain. Schmidt Cassegrains people recommend because they're half the length, meaning half the weight. And then you also get, basically the same exact aperture, but not for the same price. Obviously a lot more expensive, but it really helps with the tracking accuracy and the mount capacity. You can just get bigger apertures. So there's that. Another thing I'd recommend is a UV IR cut filter. This will help with atmospheric seeing and get rid of some of the wavelengths that prevent good atmospheric seeing. They're like 20 bucks on Amazon. You can get like an SV Bony, which is not the best one, but that's the one I have, so I've been using it. It works pretty well. Another thing I'd recommend is getting a monochrome camera. A monochrome camera is much better because you get 66% more detail. And the reason why you get this more detail is because monochrome cameras are much more sensitive to where you can get less noise, pick up more signal, and then you can get a much more detailed image. So that's why monochrome is much better. Not as dramatic as deep sky, but still an improvement. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like my content, please subscribe. Anyways, until next time, clear skies.